You're listening to the Good Question Podcast with Richard Jacobs. Our goal is to make each of our guests exclaim, that's a good question. I don't know the answer. Because when that happens, it means you, the listener, may be inspired to learn more beyond the interview and to ask great questions yourself that lead to new insights. In this podcast, we cover historical and current anthropology, comparative religion, and history. Welcome, and let's get started.
Hello, this is Richard Jacobs with the Good Question Podcast. And my guest today is an author, Susan Bartz Herrick. Her book is called Slow Dancing with the Devil, A Son's Substance Use Disorder, A Mother's Anguish. So this is going to be a very good and I think hard-hitting podcast. And Susan, thank you for coming and being willing to speak about this and write about this. And I appreciate you being here.
Well, thank you for having me, Richard. Thank you very much.
Yeah, if you would, please tell me a bit about the background of the situation that led to you writing your book.
Well, sure. Well, my book is about my son and the journey that he and I had going through substance abuse. His name was Luke, and he became dependent on narcotics at an early age, and not by his own choosing. Between 2004 and 2009, when Luke was in his mid-teens, he was prescribed some form of oxycodone 4 separate times. At that time, the medical community was really passing it out like Pez, as Purdue Pharma, the company who developed this drug, told the medical community that it was only 1% addictive, and that, of course, a dangerous lie. But to complicate things, in 2010, Luke survived a near-fatal car crash. He was 1 week on life support. He had about 27 broken bones, lacerated spleen, and other internal injuries. His chance of survival when he came in was marked at 1%. He was just crushed. Fortunately, he did survive, but then 5 years later, he had a medical device that was implanted in him at that time perforate his aorta and colon. So, to make things short, at about 11 years after his accident, Luke was hospitalized 12 times with 4 major surgeries, 3 intestinal blockages, and they all required that he had to go back on narcotics. And yet each and every time he got off the narcotics, and this was not without drama, mind you, because there was no manual to guide us through, he had successful recoveries. But what made matters worse was the fact that I found out that the medical community was clueless on how to treat somebody with SUD when it came to needing narcotics for surgery, anesthesia, and what hurt even more, it didn't really seem like they cared. I mean, they once gave Luke up to 800 milligrams of oxycodone a day. Now, that is an end. Yeah.
Crazy amount.
Yeah, that is an end-of-life cancer dosage. And then they abandoned him when the FDA and DEA made policy changes that could affect a doctor's license. And now, at that time, too, there was one drug that could help him walk off the narcotics. It was called Suboxone. But it was regulated in such a way at that time that only 3 doctors in the entire state of North Carolina were allowed to use it. And then they could only treat 10 to 30 people a month. Now, mind you, every doctor could write out prescription for opioids, but you had to have a special, what they called an X waiver, which was like 8 extra hours. And most doctors never bothered to go and get that. And yet, I tell you, my son survived and he thrived. He got into a special Ivy League school program and finished his associate's degree in political science. He became a scratch golfer, and he started his own successful CBD oil business. But the price we paid for his life was substance use disorder. And it's a disease that never goes away, no matter how many years one is in recovery.
Really? So what, because he had been through several cycles of using these opioids, that he was just predisposed to it happening again? Or what does this mean?
Well, substance use disorder is a disease. And I can get into that in a minute. I mean, it's a chronic disease that one always has a pull to go back to it. So there's no such thing as like getting totally cured. You're always walking a tightrope. And in 2021, during the pandemic, he had relapsed with Klonopin, which was given to him by a doctor, but he couldn't get off of it. And during a panic attack, he was unable to see his doctor, he asked a friend for a Klonopin, and instead he was given a drug containing a lethal dose of fentanyl. And on August 28, 2021, he died.
And he was really strong too, having gone through that accident.
Oh my God.
Those other problems, coming back again and again and again and again. Yeah.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah, he was my hero. His favorite saying was, fall down 6, get up 7.
Well, you're writing your book, not trying to say this to be cheesy or anything, but now he can be a hero to many other people or anyone that reads the book. So you're helping to keep his legacy going, which is great.
That's the reason I wrote it, Richard. I never want another parent to get the phone call I did. Because there's so many things that people do not understand about substance use disorder. I mean, case in point, when somebody hears that a person dies of an accidental overdose, this cultural image that usually pops up is that of a strung out, undisciplined party animals. I mean, after all, these are the images we see on TV.
Yeah.
And yes, some are accurate, but stigma tells you that these are the only ones dying. And it's very easy to turn a blind eye and blame an individual who looks so different from our everyday reality. The fact of the matter is that most people dying of an accidental overdose today are between the ages of 14 and 38. And an average of 22 adolescents, ages 14 to 18, lost their lives just this week due to unintentional drug overdoses. They look like us. I mean, there are neighbors, students, military, nurses, teachers. And I'll give you some stats here. Whereas in 1999, about 4,000 people died of a narcotic overdose. The count now since 1999 stands at over 1 million people who have died since Purdue Pharma introduced oxycodone to the medical community in 1996. And this 12% increase, 1,200% increase in overdose deaths in the past 24 years. And in 2023 alone, over 110,000 lost their lives. That is roughly 300 people a day, equivalent of a full capacity Boeing 727 crashing. You would think that people would care about that. But there's something else that surprised me too, is that although clinical research has advanced, the pharmaceutical companies, medical community, public policy, and cultural stigmas are still decades behind their understanding of SUD as a disease. Public policy restricts care as it blames the individual for the disease. And insurance companies, they only cover 1/4 the clinically proven time needed for recovery. And many people...
You know what they should call it? They should call it medical system-induced substance use dependency. That's what they should call it, because that's what it is.
Oh, I know. Yeah. And it's sad, too, because many people in the AANA community, Alcoholics Anonymous and Narcotics Anonymous community, still do not recognize dual diagnosis. And that means having addiction, but also another mental health problem like depression, bipolar, general anxiety disorder, which is what my son had also. And they restrict the participation in those groups of those people who need pharmaceutical intervention. It's like you have to just be totally clean, not on anything, to be a part of our group. And yet science is proving some people need some pharmaceutical help. I mean, can you imagine telling a cancer patient, that you have to not take any chemo if you're going to be a part of our cancer-free group? It makes no sense. It makes no sense.
I don't know. What are the opioid producers doing now that it seems like fentanyl has been coming up more and more, contaminating more of these drugs? Are they saying anything?
Yeah.
Do they care? What's their way to shift blame away from themselves?
Purdue Pharma is in court. They're still deciding at the Supreme Court now if they can be held totally responsible. They decided to go into bankruptcy. What happened to us with Luke and the narcotics because of surgery brought on this opioid epidemic, because the precursors, there's 4 precursors that come from China, and they get shipped down to Mexico. And that is where they cook all of this up. And they have got stamps that they press these pills that look identical to prescription drugs. So a lot of the kids who were dying, they think they're getting the real deal from a friend's mother's medicine cabinet. And there are some real nasty ones coming out now. There's an animal tranquilizer, which is 1,000 times more potent than...
Yeah, I heard carfentanil. It's insane. Like, who needs that? Who needs something where a speck of it could kill you? It's ridiculous.
Yeah, but that's what they're putting in. I asked Luke about that once, why these drugs were being added in. And he said, for a brief second, it gives the person what is perceived as is a higher high. And understanding how the brain works, Richard, is that after people start taking narcotics for a while, they're not taking it to get high anymore because tolerance has set in, okay? The high is not as high, but you don't go back to normal. You dip below, and that's when you start experiencing the withdrawal, which is very painful. I watched Luke go through withdrawal from the hospitals 4 times, and it is just absolutely gruesome. I asked him once what it felt like, and we were standing out back. We had a little Finger Lake back there, and he said, Mama, imagine somebody would throw a gallon of kerosene on you and then lights you up with a match. He said, in a split second, you have one of 2 choices. You can hightail it as fast as you can and jump in that lake, which means going back to using the drugs to keep yourself from burning, or you have to stand there for 5 to 7 days and let it burn you up alive. And he said, everything's on fire inside of you, outside of you, your eyeballs, your toenails, your hair, until it finally burns it out. And then he said, the problem is once you get out of the lake, if that's what you choose, or let it burn out, the fumes are always there because the brain, the midbrain, has been changed because of the drugs, and it craves it. And when I say the word craving too, a lot of people, think, well, I crave chocolate chip cookies. So this type of craving has nothing to do with a normal craving. Like I said, the brain actually thinks it is going to die. And that's why there are so many harsh and disruptive activities that go with substance use, is people will do just about anything to get out of this pain and anguish that they are in. Detox centers are horribly expensive, and they take a week and special drugs and people around to help you get through that. There is no easy out of going through withdrawal.
Yeah, that's terrible. Yeah, so it's not like you could say, you just need to stop because it's so difficult to stop. But, I guess they were in the throes of it, would say, here, you feel it and see what you could do.
Exactly, Richard. And that is a myth, is that people, well, you could stop if you wanted to. That's, unfortunately, that is not how it works. The brain has been rewired. In 2007, the American Society of Addiction Medicine described addiction as a treatable chronic medical disease involving complex interactions among brain cells, genetics, the environment, and an individual's life experiences, and that people with addiction use substances or engage in behaviors that become compulsive and often continue despite harmful consequences. In other words, science has shown that by becoming addicted to a substance, the normal hardwire in the healthy brain process works directly against you. It can hijack the brain's pleasure reward circuits, which hooks people into wanting more and more. It also sends one's emotional danger sensing circuits into overdrive, making one feel anxious, stressed when you're not using. And as I said, it's at this very stage that people often use more drugs or alcohol to avoid feeling bad rather than for its pleasurable effects. And, we talked about addiction as a disease. I know many people crinkle up their nose when they hear that substance use disorder is classified as a disease. And I know years ago when I worked at the psychiatric hospital, I kind of did too. But the fact of the matter is, SUD falls into a category of chronic illnesses, just like COPD, heart disease, cancer, kidney disease, and diabetes. Now, all of those chronic diseases I just named, and a lot of people don't know this, have about a 10 to 15% genetic base. That's it. The environment and lifestyle choices account for the rest. Yet, the above patients, they are treated with respect. SUD patients, not so much. I mean, can you imagine going into the emergency department for a heart attack and being denied treatment because you already had a heart attack in the past 12 months. Or to have your cancer relapse and your doctor tells you, you better clean up your act before we treat you again. And yet, it happens to those with SUD every single day. It happened to us. I tell you, Luke got out of a 30-day treatment detox program after his major surgery at Duke. I mean, they had to split him open, 19-inch scar, and cut this device out in about 100 different pieces. And it took him 10 days to be able to get released from the hospital, but the amount of drugs, again, that he was put on. So we had to walk him down. Finally, he decided to go to a detox treatment center just to help get it totally out of his system. 3 weeks after he got out, he had an intestinal blockage, which put him back on narcotics. But upon getting out, we were denied treatment because insurance was only allowed once every 12 months. Well, I argued and I said, listen, he had to go back in. He has a blockage. It's painful. He had to have them. And they said, I'm sorry, that is our policy. And then the other times he had surgery and had to be on narcotic. No one at the hospital was authorized to give him Suboxone to help him walk it off. And something else that's sad too, even though the above-mentioned chronic diseases are 85% lifestyle and environment, they have a plethora of medications to help a patient. Heart disease has about 50. Diabetes, more than 20. Cancer has more than 100. For substance use disorder, there are 3. And one is only to save one from an overdose, not to treat the disease. I mean, there's billions that are being spent to prevent SUD, but it's nearly impossible to find data on research and development of medicines and or procedures for a cure.
Yeah, now it seems to have gone the opposite way. They used to hand it out like candy. Now, I remember my wife was in the hospital with an issue a few years ago, and they gave her oxy or whatever, and I was like, oh no. And she was really diligent about it. She tried to taper herself off as soon as she could with her doctor's help. And they were like, oh, you get this many pills, and then we just cut you off. We don't care what happens to you. It's just disgusting. They addict people, they screw them up, and then they blame them and say, whatever, who cares?
Exactly. And, 2 out of 10 people will develop a physical dependency when exposed to oxycodone. So you take 10 people, 8 of them will say, oh, I can't stand this. It makes me feel terrible. I can't wait to get off of this. 2 are going to say, wow. Oh my gosh, I've never felt better in my life. It hits their brain differently. And unfortunately, as you were saying, there are people out there that could benefit from good pain relief, arthritis, just chronic pain, and they're not paying attention, and they're more afraid about the public policy that they're going to get a little red flag that they're passing out narcotics. It truly is sad.
So writing this book, obviously you're trying to make a big impact and help people.
Yeah.
What else have you done or are you doing? And, what has worked, what has not worked?
Well, as you can imagine, it's very difficult. I mean, my publisher tells me that to get a book started, written, edited, and published in 2.5 years, it was just breakneck pace. But I was grieving so badly, and I needed to understand exactly what happened. And being an academic, I just started researching and pouring out my heart on a piece of paper. And a girlfriend of mine who's a published author, said, Susan, you have a book here. And I have to say, too, I was inspired because Luke's best friend is an actor out in Hollywood, and he was just heartbroken and told me, I think in the first week that Luke was gone, he said, Susan, we need to turn Luke's story into a film. I mean, people have got to know, they've got to know the truth about not just what he went through, but what substance use disorder really is all about, and dispel some of the stigma. So Jacob asked me to write down notes, and as I started to write and pour out my heart, I realized I had a book. So as of standing now, the book just got released a few weeks ago, and the screenplay has already been finished. So
awesome.
Now we're just, it is bittersweet. I mean, it is terribly bittersweet. It threw me a punch, and that I'm never going to recover from. And anybody who has lost a child, they know exactly what I'm talking about. A part of you's missing. But what keeps me going is knowing that Luke's story can help people and hopefully waking people up to this incredible stigma that is really keeping people in the dark. Like I said, can you imagine if a Boeing 37 went down every single day? Don't you think the news would be all over that?
Well, that's a whole nother story. I've seen plenty of times of the news emphasizes one person's death, and the same day 10,000 people die in some other country and no one cares. So,
right.
Unfortunately, that's how it is. Wherever the attention goes is where people are told to care and feel bad, and wherever the attention's not, no one knows or cares, and terrible things are happening this very minute. No one cares.
Right.
No one knows.
But they don't know. And plus, the stigma. I mean, some people were really stunned when I shared in Luke's obituary that along with all of his incredible accomplishments, that he had substance use disorder and died of an unsuccessful attempt at self-medication. What hurt me so much was that at his wake, eyes avoided mine as they expressed their condolences. And after his service, many people didn't know what to say. I couldn't help but wonder why. I mean, why were they so uncomfortable? I certainly was not ashamed of my son. Then I asked,
because people have been conditioned, even if so I'm hearing your story. I'm on board with you. I agree, but I could still feel the conditioning that the media and just living this life has given me. I could recognize it and feel it there. And I'd have to hold myself back from judgment in certain cases until I got all the facts. And, I don't do that all the time. I'm guilty of it.
But Richard, would they have reacted the same way if my son had died of cancer, or if he died in the...
No, they wouldn't have. Right.
Exactly.
It would have.
Exactly.
Totally different.
Stigma. Right. Stigma told them my son got weak, wanted to get high, failed his program. Stigma told them I must be terribly ashamed of my child, and nothing could have been further from the truth. How he died did not define his life. He was not that morally deficient drug addict as the world would have you believe of so many people who suffer from the disease. I mean, truly, he was a successful businessman, college student, brilliant, funny, spiritual, kind, thoughtful. He was my hero, and he fought a noble fight, and now I'm fighting for him. We have fought stigma, especially, I think, in these last 20, 30 years. Do you remember when AIDS came out? And all the...
A little, I mean... I was born in the mid 70s, so right at the time it was right at the height.
That's an age thing. You're sorry, yeah. No, I mean, it was very stigmatized. And when the Dallas Buyers Club came out and Magic Johnson went public, then it's okay to talk about it. And then money started getting poured in for research, so we kind of destigmatized that. I mean, even 15 years ago, the thought of LGBTQ marriages, I mean, people know, the stigma. And now, it is becoming a place where nobody turns an eye. That is what I want to happen with substance use disorder, is that people from all levels, areas, find out what this disease really is about and stop the stigma, stop the way that people, and that's even just as simple as how we talk about it. Well, I've been clean now for 3 months, that implies you were dirty. I'm in recovery is a much better way of stating that. Addiction is a legitimate term, but to call somebody an addict is the same thing as like calling somebody with diabetes a fatso. The disease is terrible, but the individual is not. So separating these things, and that's what I hope that my book does, is enlighten. Yes, it is a memoir, but it is so much more than that, because as an academic and writing outside of my field of expertise, I knew I had to document absolutely everything. So I've got 9 pages of endnotes and a 12-page of bibliography that people don't have to take my word for it. They can go straight to all of the links and read what the experts have to say about it. And, I'm hoping the medical community comes along more. Out of the, 180 medical programs in the country, there are only 15 of them that teach addiction. Now, they all teach about an hour class on narcotics, but only 15 out of 180, that's like, 8%, teach about what addiction as a disease is. It should be covered under the Hippocratic Oath too, but apparently not. I mean, Congress had to pass an act last June of 23, that mandated that every single physician who wants to get their license renewed has to take a course on addiction, which used to be the X waiver, that 8-hour course where they're taught about addiction and all of these drugs. 2 years ago at a hospital close by, one of the counselors, just invited 60 doctors to come to be able to hear about the class and everything, and 6 showed up. So at least now Congress has mandated, if you want to practice medicine, you have to learn more about that. But that was June of 23.
But is the curriculum useful, or is the curriculum further demonizing people that become addicted?
Oh no, it talks about Suboxone and when it is helpful, how it is helpful. I mean, so they can prescribe that drug to help. I know many people in recovery, and Dr. Aaron Gupta, who is the author of The Preventable Epidemic and who also wrote the afterword in my book, he claims that up to 85% of his patients using Suboxone live successful, fulfilling lives. Now, it's only been since June of last year that doctors can prescribe this unless they went out to get that X waiver and bothered to learn about it. That's got to tell you something. Yeah.
I mean, look, the whole medical industry itself has been saying, oh, take this stuff here, go ahead. So they're not going to let themselves be blamed. They've shifted the blame partially onto doctors. They've shifted the blame onto the poor people that are getting addicted to this. They're not going to say, oh, it's our fault. I think they're going to try to push it.
No, they're not.
But I think that's a huge problem. There's so much money and so much stuff behind the medical industry that they're going to push it onto anyone and everyone they can, never themselves, never.
Well, look at our TV commercials, right? I mean, one after the other of pharmacy.
Yeah, people dancing around, taking this drug.
Just about to say that one where they do the musical review.
Ridiculous.
I mean,
side effects may include heart seizure, death, exploding head. Ask your doctor. Get out of here,
Right.
Terrible.
And the side effects give you worse problems. I know.
Yeah.
I know. It is tough.
So it sounds like, you've written the book, you put a lot of work in, but now the real work begins. What is, I know you're trying to get the word out on the book. I'm here to help as best I can with this podcast, but what do you see as necessary to do to really get the word out in addition to?
Well, I have a big book signing out in Los Angeles at the Grove, the Barnes and Noble there at 7 p.m. on the 4th. Yeah. And hopefully we'll get a lot of people. I have a great public relations team. Hopefully, this movie will be produced. I wrote the book and I'm talking to as many people as I can, giving lectures. I just was at the Rotary the other week. And again, so many people are so surprised at the statistics about what they're really dealing with. So I'm trying to start a movement, and I'm doing what I can with the energy that I have left, and hopefully it will fall into the hands of people. And I do have one person who might be able to take it to Congress, and hopefully that people pay attention. Obviously this is not the kind of a book, that, oh, look what I did. I didn't want to write this. I didn't want my son to die. I didn't want it. But because he did, and the heartbreak I felt, I just don't want anybody else ever to have to go through this, because it is preventable. There are things to do. There's information. But if you've got the medicalese up here and it's not dribbling down in people talk, that's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to build a bridge, trying to bring that information down, and also try to help people who have SUD say, I'm not worthy. This shame is not mine. I have a disease, just like you wouldn't be ashamed of having cancer. I have a disease, but now I have ways out. And there's no one answer, Richard, because just like with these other diseases, there's so many variants, so many levels. I mean, Luke was put on narcotics so often at huge amounts. I mean, just to save his life. The very drug that saved his life is the one that eventually took it. But we need, brilliant minds out there to take a look at this, and investigate what else can be done. Because right now, there's not a lot of tools, and there's a great big problem.
Yeah. Like one thing that comes to mind is, what is the microbiome like of people that, have this problem? And
Excellent.
are there certain probiotics that, that would help people be less addicted?
Well,
Possibility.
I tell you, Dr. Charles Gant, he recently passed away, wrote a wonderful book called End Your Addiction Now. And he treated all of his patients with amino acids, because a lot of the literature states that diet and exercise, one big thing, interestingly enough, is staying away from sugar, because of how it lights up certain areas of the brain that are very close to how the drugs light up the brain. But just intense exercise could really help build back the dopamine depletions in the brain. They can really help with recovery. And Dr. Daniel Amen has done a lot of research on this. He's got quite a few clinics, and how he talks about how diet and exercise help, and how toxins can really hurt. The brain houses our personalities, so we have to take really good care of it. But yeah, as I said, there's a lot of information out there, but people don't know.
You know what comes to mind too? So if you have SUD, you're being triggered, dopamine response.
Right.
Dopamine, I wonder if people like that tend to use social media a lot more and get addicted to their phone and get addicted, because that's just yet another way the brain is being stimulated, not with medication and stuff, but it's still locking in and reinforcing that reward, I want more cycle. So I wonder if that would be part of the treatment too, is to do a detox of that stuff and sugar and so that you're, like a treatment. Imagine a treatment program that includes, again, healthy eating, probiotics, exercise, and a detox from all the social media poison. Maybe all of that would get better outcomes.
Programs like that are successful. The fact is, they need more than 30 days. They need more than 60 days. Sobriety houses are wonderful. Luke went to one in the Last House, which is a big sobriety house out in Los Angeles. That's what their program is. And after a year's time, I mean, these guys come out healthy, happy. They're in recovery. You always have to have a check on, just like if you've ever had cancer once, you're always looking around to see, is it going to come back? No, but that makes, those things really do help in recovery, very much so.
Yeah.
But taking away, Luke, when he had 3.5 years that no hospitals, no drugs, no anything, he got addicted to golf. He had to go out every single day. His brain was wired just like that. And
that's what I mean is
yes, however, if your brain is wired a certain way, you cannot tell somebody with ADD, stop it, get over it. It's how their brain chemistry works. Good addictions, bad addictions. My husband, who's not Luke's father, asked me if I thought that his golf was an addiction. And I said, yeah, but I reminded him of what one of my colleagues at the hospital once said. She was a recovering alcoholic for 30 years. And she was asked, well, isn't eating just like alcoholism? Isn't an addiction just an addiction? She said, Susan, nobody ever had to haul me out of the gutter with a Twinkie in my hand. And I never had to hide a gallon of milk in the toilet bowl. So it is, different addictions do hurt people different ways. Do I think social media is harmful? Absolutely.
But what if one predisposes you to the other and the other predisposes you to one? What if I don't?
That happens.
What if,
I mean, I am not an addictionologist, okay? You know, I'm telling my story here. If we lived in a perfect world where parents were there for their kids, where there was wonderful interactions all the time, no traumas, most kids who really get into drugs at an early age do so because of trauma. It keeps that pain away. You know, I had a girlfriend who could not have enough ramen bags. You know, every time she bought one, it made the pain go away. Social media can make the pain go away. A lot of, gambling, so many different things that can go from enjoyment to I have to have this to keep that trauma feeling away. It is a multifaceted problem.
Yeah.
But
I know there's just armchair speculation, but based on what you said, it's just ideas are coming.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
Okay. Well, very good, Susan. Thank you for coming on and, for being able to share this. And I definitely encourage people to get your book, Slow Dancing with the Devil.
Thank you.
I'm sure it's Amazon Kindle. Is it on Audible as well? Is it an audiobook?
It will be. It will be. It's coming. Yeah, it is coming. Yeah.
Okay. And then the movie, when do you think the release date might be?
We're still looking for producers. So we're at, the screenplay is done. He's only been gone 2.5 years. So, we're ahead of the curve a bit, but that I'm leaving, to Jacob, who is Luke's best friend. But everybody on that team is very dedicated to getting this done.
Okay. Well, excellent. Well, again, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. I really appreciate it.
And I appreciate you having me on, truly. Thank you so much.
Thank you for listening to the Good Question Podcast. Please email support@thegoodquestionpodcast.com if you have any referrals to great guests for us to interview. Visit thegoodquestionpodcast.com to hear more interviews. And please help us spread the word by rating and reviewing us on Apple Podcasts, iTunes, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you listen to this podcast.